Kathy's escape. Oh, wait. Sorry, hold on. I feel like Kathy's escape must have been unexpected. She's been in the order for 50-something years. It would be interesting to know what finally changed. You know, what does it take 50-something years for someone to finally make that decision to leave?
I'm the first wife of Robbie Brown. We have 16 children together.
In the order, they teach you have those babies every single year. You have as many as you can, just as fast as you can.
Kathy is the first wife of Robbie, who's a numbered man in the order. And it's kind of interesting. She's been there for 55 years. The son that's trying to help her to leave says that he's finally gotten a place for her. I wish I could know, like, what went on through her mind. Because we do later on throughout the series see that Kathy is a very strong supporter of like helping people to leave the order, and she understands that the order is very controlling and manipulating, and she even talks about her example of when she got married and how much she felt forced into it, and how that was like just the topic of everything that they told you to do, that they made it sound like that was her only goal and purpose in life. And later on she realizes that that might not be the best for everybody to be pressured into.
Growing up in the order, we were not encouraged to get an education. We were taught as young women that our main goal in life was to get married and have a family.
And so she understands the manipulation and the things that are happening around her, yet it still took her 50-something years to leave and to take that initiative. Clearly, there's a lot of psychological components that's happening to people in these cults, some that will make them even push off leaving it for 50-something years. Isn't that crazy? Kathy is married to a numbered man in the order, and his number is 63. If you want to learn more about him, you can actually go to my sister Amanda's YouTube video, her lives that she does. If you go to episode 63 of A Culty Cup of Coffee, she talks about this numbered man, and it goes into a little bit more detail of his specific story. But at least for this episode in Escaping Polygamy, it mainly focuses on Kathy's escape. So we'll mostly be diving deep into that. Because Kathy's a first wife, it's going to be even extra hard because her husband will have legal rights to the kids. Most of the plural marriages don't have any legal connection to the father. But when you're the first wife, then they will be married legally. So it can make it harder with the custody of the kids. When you're also trying to get the kids out of that environment, if the father's going to fight that, it's going to make it very difficult. So like Amanda and I, we don't have our dad on our birth certificates because our mom is the second wife, so there's no legal marriage, there's no legal connection between me and my dad. But with Kathy's kids, they actually have the father on the birth certificate. So it's interesting to see how all the legal situation is going to be dealt with in her unique situation. Thinking about what might have been some of the motivation for Kathy to finally leave, she has a 14-year-old that is not married, a 14-year-old daughter. And it sounds like this daughter is being courted, encouraged to get married, and there could be a lot of pressure for her to get married and have children.
She's old enough that they're gonna start preparing.
That's exactly why I have to get her out of there.
And I mention this a lot of the time with my own personal story and escape. And when I correlate the physical abuse and the harsh situations of the environment that I grew up in, oftentimes when I think of the physical abuse that I personally received, it didn't seem that bad because I was so used to it. And it's much easier to accept something harsh happening to yourself as an individual, but it's actually oftentimes I see that it's much harder when you see it being done to somebody else. And for me, it was when I would see my younger siblings getting beat, it was way harder for me to accept that and just to be okay with that than it was to just accept that I would get beat. And so I think in a similar way, it could be seen that Kathy is seeing her daughter and doesn't want her daughter to go through some of the harsh things that Kathy was willing to put herself through. But it might be a lot harder to be willing and okay with putting your own child through that. I would imagine that would be very difficult.
I am so thankful that I had the boys that I had. I mean, out of 16 kids, 12 of them are boys. It's such a blessing because they don't want the boys.
In this episode, they also try to go over the genealogy of the leaders of the order, and it is so crazy. There's just so many, and I grew up in it, so I can kind of connect the dots and what they're showing in the clips and how they're connecting all the genealogy. But I'd imagine someone that hasn't come from that group or that environment, it's so confusing. It's just crazy how many people that there are and just how closely related everybody is and all the mixed marriages and everything. It's just, man, I'm sorry. I kind of want to do a video on this. I know Amanda's working on one too, but I mean, it's just going to be so hard. So the order was like started and created by Eldon Kingston, the very first prophet of the order, the very first leader, the person who created the Kingston polygamous group that they called the order. Eldon Kingston died not too long after it was created and everything got started, and then his brother Ortel Kingston was the next prophet and leader. And Ortel Kingston had 13 wives, but his second wife was LaDonna, and she was known to be his favorite wife. The order always claims that, oh, there's no favorites, yada yada, whatever, but it very clearly shows through, especially with the fact that LaDonna had a son named Paul Kingston, and he's the one that became the next leader, and he is the current leader of the order to this day. And LaDonna's 7 sons are kind of those 7 brothers of Paul that kind of run and are the top people of the order. So I think it's pretty obvious that she was the favorite. Kathy's got 16 kids with her husband, and she was born and raised in the order. So it's definitely been very ingrained into her mind.
My husband was 33 when he started courting the second wife. She was 12, and she was 14 when she married him. And it just made me sick because she was still a little girl.
I had kids that's just 2 years younger than her.
I stayed there because I thought that I had to. I thought that was my destiny.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Her husband was 30 when he started courting a 12-year-old, and they got married at 14. How extremely crazy these people can be when they just are being encouraged, and the order is allowing these horrible behaviors and lifestyles. And it's like, they've got to know that that 12-year-old had no idea what she was getting into. When she goes and marries him at 14 years old, how can they be okay with this? He was 30, you guys, 30. He had to know that she did not understand what she was getting herself into, and he was just manipulating her right along. It's so disgusting. I don't want to believe it, man. That's crazy.
My sister Susan and I are here to see our sister Shirley to let her know that I will be leaving polygamy.
So Shirley comes back in this episode, which, I mean, I guess I saw this coming because Kathy's they're sisters with each other, right? So this part really shows how strange it can be trying to talk with some of the members of this cult.
I'm leaving Robbie and I'm leaving the order. I'm not going to allow Becky to grow up thinking that she has to marry some old man. I think you ought to leave too, Shirley.
Ooh, is that a threat?
Because I've said it before, the members of the order, I feel like, are very different than just any other cult. The order has found a way to make a lot of their members, even though they may sometimes rarely share that they don't like it in the order or that they don't believe that it's right, they still somehow have this very strong desire to stay a part of it. And I think it could link back to manipulation tactic that they use about eternal life in the end. And they've done a really good job at like basically making these older members not care at all about what happens in this life because of what's supposed to come in the next life. And they put such a high value on that reward in the next life that it's like, even if they would agree and can share their feelings of how much it sucks being in the order, how horrible it might be, how bad of a situation it is, if they still believe that they may get a ticket to heaven for doing all that, they're still willing to do it. They would still go through all of that, and they don't care. They don't care how bad it is. They don't care what they have to go through. In this situation in particular, you can just see kind of how sad it is, how they're willing to put their kids through the worst of it, completely disregard their mental health.
You're not handling it. You're sitting back and you're saying, okay.
And just for that hope, some type of golden ticket to heaven, you know? From an outside perspective, it's very clear to see that there is no ticket that's involved with this, but it's fascinating to see how hardcore dedicated people are to believing that there is some reward that they'll get for living this polygamous lifestyle, and then that what they are willing to do for that. This episode also touches a little bit on Leah's story. Once again, it kind of follows up with her, and it's showing her going through a little bit of a rough time because she doesn't seem to be able to catch a break.
It's been a while.
So how did you end up here?
She has this rough situation happen with one of her roommates. She ends up losing her rent money, and she has to find a cheaper place to stay temporarily. And so it's really cool to see Andrea and Chanel help her out. It's just tough. She shares a little bit about how difficult it can be with that transition. And even though she was transitioning very good at first, then, there's just so many things that throughout the transition process, but I don't know, it's also extra hard when you don't have someone to fall back onto, you don't have parents to turn to get help, or, to receive counsel and guidance from and stuff like that. I feel like this is a very good example of just kind of showing that the struggles do come with leaving an environment like that, but it's clearly not impossible, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not easy when you leave a polygamous group, but there's a lot of good that can come from it for sure.
Okay, let's go. We're leaving. We got these boxes under the table, everything on the table and the table. Don't have all day.
The end of the episode shows Kathy and her kids moving into the new house.
Whoa, an actual bag.
This is a nice house. That looks like our one house.
Yeah.
And that part was really sweet. It was really cool to see them so excited. And she expresses how much her kids mean to her. Overall, I feel like this was a really good episode. It really touched on a lot of emotions. Shares some of the struggles and difficulties of that process of leaving everything that you knew behind. I'm excited to see what happens next.
They worship him. They're always praying for him. If Paul says something, it's as if God himself is here speaking to us.
Appreciate my membership, and I know that Brother Paul is the man on the watchtower.
I know that Brother Paul is the man on the watchtower, and the order is the right place to be, and it's the only place on earth we can get to the celestial kingdom.